You hear it all the time, right? The big debate around AI is always, is it going to take my job? But what if we're asking the wrong question? What if the real story isn't about the jobs that disappear, but about what happens to our judgment in the jobs that are left?
To really get this, we're not going to start in some high-tech lab. Nope. We're starting on the streets of Beijing with a man named Hu Anyan. And this one single sentence from his book, it just perfectly captures the brutal reality of his life as a delivery driver. A reality that wasn't dictated by a human boss, but by an algorithm.
And you know what? His story completely blew up. It went viral, became a book, and sold almost 2 million copies. So why did it connect with so many people? Because it put a name and a face to a feeling that more and more of us are starting to have, what it's really like to be managed by a machine.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What did it actually look like to be managed by this machine? What was his reality on the ground?
Well, his reality was pretty stark. We're talking 12-hour shifts for just 2 yuan a delivery. That's about 29 cents. Often in extreme heat, with no health insurance, no fixed salary. But that last point is the real kicker. The algorithm wasn't just some helpful tool. It was his manager. It assigned his work, measured his performance, and disciplined him. There was no one to appeal to. His only job was to comply.
Now, for a long time, we've looked at this as a problem for gig workers, but that's all changing. The same kind of algorithmic manager that directed Hu Anyan, well, it's getting a promotion. It's moving out of the warehouse and right into the corporate office.
And the technology making this happen is called agentic AI. This is not your old AI assistant that just sits there waiting for you to ask a question. No, these are autonomous systems. They don't just help you do your job, they take ownership of the entire workflow, from planning all the way to execution.
And just look at how fast this is happening. According to Deloitte, right now, in 2024, less than 5% of companies are using this tech. But by 2026, that's just 2 years from now, that number is projected to hit 40%. That is an absolutely astonishingly rapid shift in the workplace.
But here's the thing you have to understand. This whole architecture for managing work, it isn't new. It was field-tested and perfected out in the gig economy, on the backs of millions of workers just like Hu Anyan.
And when you put them side by side, the connection is crystal clear. The who is changing for sure. It's moving from gig workers to knowledge workers. But the what and the result, they are identical. All the decision-making gets concentrated in the software, while the humans are just left with execution. The outcome is the same. Your work is dictated by a logic you can't see and you certainly can't question.
Of course, the promise is always a massive boost in productivity. But there's a hidden cost. And to really see it, we need to understand the difference between two very different kinds of AI impact: cognitive relief and decision compression.
So first, you've got the good kind, cognitive relief. This is when AI takes over all the tedious, low-value stuff like scheduling or paperwork. Think of a nurse who's freed from hours of charting so she can spend more time with a patient. This doesn't reduce her agency, it actually increases it. It lets her focus on what really matters, her judgment and her care.
But then you have decision compression. This is totally different. This is when the system takes over the discretionary tasks, the ability to sequence your own work, to prioritize, to decide what's important. Cognitive relief removes a burden. Decision compression removes the need to think.
And this distinction brings us to this idea of agency. And it turns out we're really talking about two different kinds of agency here, and they're moving in completely opposite directions.
It's a direct trade-off. On one side, you have operational agency. That's the system's ability to get things done. And that is expanding like crazy. On the other side, you have moral agency. That's our human ability to interpret, to judge, and to be held accountable. And that is contracting.
So how does this actually happen? It's a pretty specific process. First, your discretion gets reduced. The system just tells you what to do next. Second, its logic is totally opaque. You don't know why it's making these choices. Third, you can't contest it. Your only options are basically to comply or to quit. And finally, and this is the really subtle part, the system itself decides what information even counts, which completely eliminates your space to interpret the situation for yourself.
Let's make this real. Think about a supply chain analyst. An AI tool now ranks all the vendors for her. She doesn't see the raw data anymore. She doesn't build the mental models in her head. She just clicks approve. So she's not making a bad decision. She's not making a decision at all. Her title says analyst, but her actual function is now just to ratify what the machine has already decided. Now, when you scale that dynamic up across an entire economy, the implications go way beyond any single job. We have to start asking a much bigger question. What happens to our organizations and even our society when judgment itself starts to migrate away from humans?
This gets to a really critical idea. Judgment isn't something you just have. It's a practice. It's a skill you develop by using it. It's like a muscle, right? If you never contract a muscle, it's going to weaken and atrophy.
And it looks like we are choosing to stop using that muscle at a staggering rate. Gartner projects that by 2028, a full 15% of our day-to-day work decisions will be made by autonomous systems. Think about that. That is a massive amount of practice, of exercise for our judgment that is just about to vanish.
So, we're left with this final, really unsettling question. If we build a world where humans are trained simply to execute, to just follow the logic of a system they can't see or contest, what kind of judgment is going to be left in us? And maybe more importantly, what kind of civilization inherits that result?